Welcome to this talk. Um, my name is Tim Spillane. Today we're going to be talking about visual storytelling. And for this talk, that means mostly through drawing. There are many ways of visual storytelling in this day and age. Seeing as everybody has a film studio in their pocket, it looks like a phone. But for this one, we're going to use old technology, pen, paper. So I'm going to give you some tips on drawing and maybe do a couple of demos, and we might look at how drawing and visual storytelling has developed over the ages. So if you want to pause now and go and get some pens and paper, do and join in. So what I want to start off with is, because ever since humans have evolved, we've been felt the need to tell our stories and to represent our stories through visual images, because we like to look at images of ourselves, of our surroundings, of our animals, and what has happened. And since caveman times, we have enjoyed looking at representations of animals and ourselves. And what we're going to start off with is to tell any human story. A very handy starting point is there are universal expressions of the face that everybody recognizes. And to begin to loosen up, we're going to try some of those in a very simple fashion. So what we're going to start off with is some egg shapes. So basically, that's an egg representing the human head. We would give him or her some eyes, a nose, and we will decide how this character is feeling today. So we'll go for this one. We kind of know how that person is feeling today. Universally recognized, we'll even do a bigger one. He's feeling really good. And of course, then we have recognized through the world. The opposite of that, which is turn that upside down. So if you want to try this, it's very easy. Egg shape, eyes, nose, happy, sad. We can go on to the other fairly recognized one, squashed over a bit, to make this guy, you can tell already, really angry. And this doesn't take long. It's like doing your own emojis. Give it a go. So the last one we'll do is something a bit more subtle. Eyes, nose. Surprised. If you want to develop these a bit more, from this very basic shape, you can just give them a bit of hair, ears, neck, happy man. Give him hair like mine, ears like mine, I don't know, beard. Very sad. Angry person, And then surprised guy. So these are universally recognized expressions that everybody can immediately know. And no matter how subtle you get with the expressions, these always remain the same. You can vary them, but they're kind of the very basics with an egg shape. So what I'm going to talk about now is how, as I was saying earlier, when we were living in caves, you'd think we were very unsophisticated and uninterested in art. And art, of course, is what makes us human. And this has developed since the very early times that man was on the planet. So here is one of the most common, well, a very common cave painting. And we can all relate to this. These are sometimes tens of thousands of years old, but whoever did this has left their mark. I was here. We can all relate to that. So you can see this many times on cave walls, featuring many hands or one hand, but this is leaving an imprint of a very basic kind. So if you want to try this at home, it's quite easy. What the caveman would have done, if he was doing it, he would have filled his mouth with pigment and spat over his hand until he was left with that. Now, I don't recommend that method really. So what you can do, you can use a glove, of course, but if you don't mind getting a bit dirty, you put your hand up there, you get an old toothbrush, you dip it in some ink, and you flick the ink over, leaving you with that, which is your getting in touch with your ancient ancestors. Now, as time went on, excuse me, they became more sophisticated. And what you can see on a lot of cave paintings and cave walls is something like this. Now, I've isolated this animal out of, there are actually many on the cave paintings in France. And again, thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, pre-writing, hunter-gatherers in caves, going out hunting, collecting what they can from the countryside to survive. And yet it felt the need to have this on the wall of their cave. Now this, speaking as an artist, I have drawn this representation. This is actually a very sophisticated image for that time, for any time, because it's recognizable. It's got a stylized beauty to it that you can see with the other ones, and well worked. If you can find the images, copying them and seeing how intricate and sophisticated these images are. So moving on in time from the caveman's visual storytelling, mostly of hunting and their environment, we move on to ancient Egypt, where again visual storytelling was really important. These, of course, hieroglyphics and wall paintings. You'd see them all over ancient Egypt, on temples, houses, tombs, we'd know. And these would be along the walls, telling the story, in the case of tomb, of whatever king or queen was buried there, or holy man, or along the wall would be told his life, his or her life story. Good example of visual storytelling being a part of everyday life. And not even these obvious drawings, but each hieroglyph in these little cartouches, and these are actually all individual little drawings representing to an ancient Egyptian a sentence, a word. Sometimes just for decoration, but other times delivering a message and a story to whoever was able to understand it. Now, another great nation for visual storytelling is Japan. And Japan has a history. This is my copy of an ancient, this is 16th century samurai, but from that 14th, 15th, 16th century method of drawing, it brings us right up to today and the popularity of manga and anime. The Japanese still very popular in Japan. People read manga on the subway, and it's of all ages. It's not just young people. So from Japan, we bring it closer to home. So in the context of Ireland, if you've ever seen the high crosses, such as the one at Clonmacnoise ones, there's storytelling, visual storytelling involved, admittedly not drawing, but they will be painted images. There are engraved into them little figures and little panels telling normally a biblical story of the crucifixion or some, but they build up sequentially, telling the story on the cross. My final example of visual storytelling from ancient times, relatively ancient, would be the Bayeux Tapestry, which is the Sláine tapestry telling the story of the conquest of England by William the Conqueror. Of course, before that, he wasn't known as the Conqueror, as something a bit ruder, but there's some script on the top and the bottom, but it's mostly visual images in sequence telling the story of the conquest. And it goes on, and it is a very good example of early visual storytelling through drawing. So that will lead us to a quick demonstration. I like history, I always have done, and what we have a go at here is kind of in the style of the horrible histories. I'll do a quick demonstration of a Norman following on from the Bayeux Tapestry, because those visual representations of the warriors, the Norman soldiers, you can see what they wore, what their shields were like, what their swords were like. So we'll give a quick demonstration in that style. So first of all, they had the famous Norman helmet, which is a conical helmet with a nose guard. And in that Martin Brown style, who was the illustrator for many of the horror histories, which I quite like, he has this kind of eyes. And going back to our earlier expressions, most Normans, when they were at this stage, dressed up for war, were fairly angry and intimidating. You didn't want to see this guy coming towards you. And then they would have a mail coif, they were called, which would protect the head from blows by a sword or a mace. And then we have the very distinctive Norman shield, which covered most of the body. Something like that, with a cross in the middle. And you can tell the decorations that were on them by looking at the Bayeux Tapestry. So this would have been a common motif. There would be dots in here. So then you would have a male surcoat as a sidearm. You would have a sword in a scabbard. And for these purposes, both on horseback and on foot, they had very effective spear. Now, this is quite simple as a demo, but you can see how we know what these guys look like from something like the bio tapestry. And of course, the Normans then came to Ireland and changed Irish history totally. So there you have your Normans. You can just indicate the male. You don't have to draw every link. There we have our Norman warrior. Now, if we go back to the cave paintings, a very common representation of the human being was something like this. Now, we're all very familiar with that matchstick man. And I think everybody can have a go at that. As children, we tend to draw unself-consciously and enjoy drawing. That drops off in a lot of people as we get older. We get more self-conscious and are worried about the sophistication of their drawing. Excuse me. If you take someone like Picasso, who spent a lot of his life trying to get back to trying to draw as a child, unself-consciously and easily. So we all remember this guy. I don't know whether Hangman is still played, but it was unfortunate for the poor matchstick man. But if you take this very basic representation of a human, you can actually do some more sophisticated things with it. So if we pick an action, and how will we make this into something a bit more dynamic? If we take the example of kicking a ball, so let's make him kick a ball. So we have his head, body. We'll give him maybe a joint there and a hand. Get him in the kicking action. Again, we're giving him feet and joints. But at the same time, he is essentially a matchstick man. As long as the action is clear and you can see what's going on, it starts to become more alive while still using the basic matchstick man. We could also have him running. We would do him running. And if you make the pose dynamic enough, you make him really run. him some attitude maybe, if we do that, and we get the head. Let's see, give him folded arms. Cross his legs. Oh, there's the dog making his opinion clear. So it's something to mess around with as to making poses from a very, very basic figure that we can all recognize. And even on the cave paintings, where mostly these guys were hunting, the action was very clear, even though it's not sophisticated in any way. Now we can develop this into something, again, more advanced, more related to anatomy as we know it, but I'll go with that now. So again, we'll stick with the basic shape. We'll start with our head, you might make it a bit more egg-shaped again. So if we take our trunk, but what we can do is introduce joints. So there's shoulders, we give them a hip joint, down to an elbow, hand, elbow, hand. From the hip, we'll go down to the knee, joints, joints, and down, and giving some. So you can see we're developing from the stick man a more sophisticated representation of a human. Now, where do we go from here? Well, here's something we've all done. How to make a box. Rectangle, rectangle, join up the edges, and a box shape. Not very difficult. If you want to look up at the box, you have a small box, you have a bigger box, join up the edges. You're looking upwards at the box. Now, what we do with our man here is we can see where the masses of the body are. So we have the chest area, the torso, we have the hips. So if we take our box idea and add it in here, and we'll just leave it at the box. So we'll do a smaller one at the back, because we're looking front on. And there we have the chest area, we can do the same. With the hips, and suddenly you're developing into a better framework as a representation of a human being. Now, if we take those basic shapes and we introduce another one, which is kind of a cut-off cone, that's all that is. This is just a development of the box idea. So if you take a circle, take a smaller circle, join them up. There we go. So if we start introducing them, and you can probably tell where they're going to go if we use this shape. That's the upper leg. We use this again. We're fleshing out our shape, the human shape. This again, if you turn it around, will be the feet. Let me have a look at that in the monitor. Yes, that's okay. Now again, we use these from the shoulders, which we've done as joints. And then we have that, another one, and there we go. And suddenly we have fleshed out our matchstick man to look more like a human and to represent the masses of the body. So from our poor friend who keeps getting hanged, we have developed into this, which is a bit more sophisticated, but still based on that ancient representation of a man. Now, if we want to get closer to this bit, and we want to develop a representation of a human head, we can go back to our egg shape. So we have our egg shape. Now, that is, of course, representing the skull. If you roughly do a line in the middle, that's where your eyes are going to be. Now, eyes, if you look at my face, the placement of the eyes on a relatively realistic human drawing, there's two eyes, there's one eye length in the middle, or one eye width, and there's one on this side and one on this side, so that's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you mark out where your eyes are going to be, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These eyes, of course, then go here and here. Now, the eyes in any representation of human are really important because they say the eyes are the window to the soul. So if you get the eyes wrong, if one of them is looking that way, one of them is looking this way, and it doesn't work. So you have to work a bit at that. But what we'll do, just for general rules now, so if you remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we go relatively halfway between what we have from the eyes to the chin, and we put a little marking there, that's where your nose is going to go. And these are all broad rules, of course, they don't apply to every human, but roughly, that's where your nose is going to be. Now, again, you can see that there. If you then take what you've left from the bottom of the nose to the chin and you roughly do a halfway, that's where the mouth is going to be. So then if we add some eyebrows, and the ears in this space are going to be roughly there, maybe a little bit above. So there we go. Let's see. We have a rough representation of a human head. Obviously, you then put on whatever kind of hair you want to put on. Here I mine again, roughly. So, just some broad rules if you come to draw a human head. And once you've done that, you can go back to the egg expressions and mess around with that and make, just do a quick angry one. So we do the angry eyebrows, you know where the nose is, you know where the mouth is. And that's how you go. Again, very quick for this demonstration. So, this this is all about structured drawings, and in animation especially, every character that's drawn has a base structure. Again, going back to our friend, the cube, circle. If, for instance, they wanted to draw a horse, there's two stages in animation drawing. There's a rough drawing. In the old days, it used to be done in a very light blue pencil. And then once you're satisfied with the pose that you have created, you go in with a darker pencil and pick out the pose. So what a rough drawing might look like is, if we think about a horse, we start with a circle, another circle, and another circle. Add another circle there. Circle. Put this one out. This is kind of how you rough out your drawing. Surprise looking horse. So this is how rough drawing works, and it's using these circles to come up with a horse. So I mean, the thing about a circle is you can make a basic circle can take on many angles. So if you put this line here and this line here, you can put that line up there, that one there, straight on, right there. So if you start to introduce eyes into these, you can start to see how working with basic shapes can be advantageous. Now, if you want to disregard all of this structural drawing, it's nice to know sometimes the techniques of getting these drawings together. What you can do is disregard all of that. And what you can do, if you want to disregard all of that, if you find it too complicated, sometimes it's nice to know the rules. You can absolutely disregard it. Now, there is an illustrator I admire called Quentin Blake, very famous. He has illustrated many of Roald Dahl's books, and these days David Williams' books. His Roald Dahl's have become iconic. You have James and the Giant Peach and the Twits even. But what I'll do here is I'll do a quick rendition of his Matilda. And what you'll notice about this is it's a much looser style. It's not too worried about construction. It's a simpler representation of a human which we can still relate to, and it still tells a story. So we'll just give a bash at that. It's not so much worried about construction. It's just keeping that loose style. So do the nose, eye, of course. So this is not too worried about being close to reality or realistic proportions, but it has a charm all of its own and still gets across emotions and telling a story. And as we know about Matilda, she loves her books, so do books, a book. If you want to know how to do a book course, you go back to our old friend, the box shape, and there you have your book. In this case, Matilda is sitting on a pile of books. So it's just very loose. It's actually a nice way to draw. She's sitting on a pile of books here. Now, I'm going quick enough for this demonstration, but what you can do is take your time. So, there she is. And then, of course, introduce, sorry about that, something fell off the table. Shading with a marker that is almost gone. And then, of course, we have the floating book. After my demonstration, we can make that part of the story. Just add those. For some reason, she's looking at floating book. So it's just another approach. This is more, of course, book illustration normally, but that can easily be animated as well into a cartoon. Now, as a final demonstration of how this construction works, we'll take our box shape again. And see how we can make that work. So there's our box. And then we're going back to rectangle, rectangle, joining the edges. So how can that work as a cartoon character? Well, when we start to introduce features, we have a pair of eyes, nose, mouth, teeth. You can start to see how this becomes a character, recognizable to most people at this stage. And here indeed are his square hands. So, of course, he has arms, as every sponge has. And always enthusiastic, so onwards. And he's running. He has a very nice pair of shoes. So there we have SpongeBob. Now we can all go back later and add the details. Every sponge has had holes. So it's one to try with your box shape. You can just do a couple of bubbles because he's under the sea, of course. So, to recap, we've always liked telling stories through visuals. And I think it's something worth hanging on to because there are many ways these days to bypass the drawing stage with computers, for instance. But I think to hang on to the traditions of physical drawing are very important because what I do a lot is a thing called a storyboard. And that's hundreds of drawings, much like a comic book, that prepares for filming. If somebody's doing a feature film or a TV episode in animation, in film, it's live action. It's a way of planning out for a director, everything very cheaply. So it's done by drawing still, even now in this day of computer. A computer can't come up with a sequence of drawings to tell a story. I can't adapt to whatever story is put in front of it and tell the story. Now I use a computer a lot. I think of a tablet for my current work, but still it's important to stay with the tools of the trade, paper, pen. Now I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you go away and have a go with it, and above all, have fun with it. That's the most important thing. That's what drawing is about, having fun. And from nothing, that one, from nothing, blank page, all of a sudden you've created something that people can look at. And hopefully after a few of these tips go, wow, look at that. Simple but effective. Enjoy. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.